Good evening. It's Monday. It's late. And so I just wanted to bring you the Missionary Minute for today. I posted this morning that I love Mondays. They're brand new starts. And I was thinking about just keeping yourself charged up, keeping yourself excited in the ministry, and breaking ministry myths. We've talked over these missionary minutes. We've talked a lot about busting some of the ministry myths that exist. And one ministry myth that exists is that burnout is inevitable, and that you're gonna change the way you think about ministry. You're going to change the way you think about people. You'll become cynical. You won't approach things with the same love as you did in the very beginning. And there again, I'm always talking about advice that our pastor gave us, and that's key. He told us in the very beginning to stay charged up, to do whatever it takes to keep your spirit man charged up. There are so many demands, and there's so many pulls on your time. There's pulls on the reserve that you have inside of you. There's pulls on just the inner strength that you have. People with needs continually coming to you and needing to be ministered to drains what reserve you have on the inside as a minister. And so you have to keep yourself charged up. You have to keep yourself prayed up. Sometimes that's hard in the ministry because there's so many demands. There's so many things to do. We have 8 feeding centers now. And with that, 8 feeding centers, and these days, especially right now, we've been going through a very difficult time with the children. There's so many sick kids, and I'm catch myself needing, they start calling early in the morning, or we've got to coordinate rides down the mountain. And so often, things can happen early in the morning to take your prayer time, to steal your recharge time from you. And, when you build a fire, if you don't put another log on the fire, that one log that you put on, it will burn out. You have to continually keep putting logs on the fire. The Apostle Paul told Timothy, you stir up the fire, you stir up the gift. And we have to blow on that fire. We have to put another log on it. What puts logs on your fire? Spending time in the presence of the Lord. Spending time in His Word. You can't live off of yesterday's Word. You've got to have fresh manna. God told the children of Israel they had to go out every day and collect the manna. They couldn't except for, on Friday for the Sabbath. But as a general rule, they couldn't take enough for 2 days. It would rot. And so, we've got to get alone with God. I don't care, I'm not saying don't do ministry responsibilities that you have. That's one thing that a lot of people want to do. Well, then I need to cut back on ministry so that I have time to spend with God. Sometimes you have to make personal sacrifices. I was talking about giving up something to go up with God. I don't know if that was last week or the week before, but sometimes you're going to have to give up. Jesus gave up sleep. He gave up food. One time He said, I have meat that you don't even know anything about. And we have to make personal sacrifices sometimes. Ultimately, we're going to be held accountable for what God told us to do. So when God's told you to do something, you have to be responsible to do it. And that's what you need to find out. What assignments has God given me? And I'll do those. Every work it may be a good work, but it may not be that you're called to every work. So you're going to have to decide from the Lord what it is He's calling you to do. And then you be faithful and do that. If you have to give up TV time, if you have to give up sleep, but you can't give up your prayer time. If you do, you're going to wind up bitter and cynical, burnout, tired, no patience for people. You know, somebody said one time the ministry would be great if it wasn't for people. That's not the way to be. That's not the way to be. You have to, let everything that you do it with all your heart. You see, you're not doing it for that single mom. You're not doing it for that teen. You're not doing it for that father that's struggling with this or with that. You're not doing it for those people. Whatever you do it heartily as unto the Lord and not unto men. That's the way you keep your joy. Number one, you stay prayed up. You keep logs on the fire. You keep wood on the fire. And then you remember that you're not doing it to people. You're doing it to the Lord. He said, if you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. That's why whatever you do it with all of your heart, the Bible says. You have to do it with all of your heart. And when you do it with all of your heart, like unto God, then you'll keep that love. You'll keep that first love feeling for the ministry, for people. And I think that's what Jesus had to do. He had to keep his eyes on what God had called him to do. How do you think he had the Last Supper with Judas sitting right there, knowing what was going to happen? You see, he had to be right. He had to be prayed up in his spirit. Because if we're not prayed up in our spirit, it's so easy to get in the flesh. Even as ministers, we're human. And when you have, for example, if you have, I had to switch arms, my arm is tired. When you have a child, if you have two children, and one you feed and one you do not, which one is going to grow? The one you feed, right? So if you feed your flesh all day long, and we have to live in this world, everything that we do, just lends to that. Everything that we hear that doesn't line up with the word, feeding our flesh. Everything that we do, every doctor's report, everything that doesn't line up with the word, all that does is feed your flesh. And you have to live in the world. So you've got to make what you feed your spirit man more than what you feed your flesh. Because whichever one you feed the most, it's going to be the biggest and it's going to win out. So if you want to make full proof of your ministry, if you want to make full proof of your Christian walk with the Lord and not burn out, I know great dear friends that would move from one city to another, and when they found their church, they would say, we need to just sit out for a while. We're burnt out. Our pastor taught us, if you burn out, it's because you didn't put enough fuel back in yourself. If you burn out, it's because you didn't keep the fire stoked with wood. You got to worship the Lord. You got to be in His Word. You've got to be in His presence. And then you're going to have that fire on the inside. I wrote this morning, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And you can only ignite in others what you have on fire inside of you. So you stay on fire for God. I don't care if I'm 100 years old. I want to stay on fire for God. I want to go out on a flame. Hallelujah. So I hope that this has helped you this week. Stay fired up. Stay tuned in to God. Stay on track, and you won't burn out. Love you guys. Have a great week. Make the most of it. Burn, baby, burn.